Welcome to RAIN, the Real Estate Investor Growth Network with your hostess, Jen Josey. Join like-minded real estate investors and accelerate your business towards greatness. You will hear step-by-step strategies for success, interviews with real estate rock stars, and we will dig deep into past projects where we bear it all, including the good, the bad, and some just plain ugly. So get excited. Here's the bestower of Badassery herself, the real Jen Josey. Listener discretion is advised.
Hi, and welcome back. I'm Jen Josey, creator of RAIN, the Real Estate Investor Growth Network. Whoop, whoop. On today's episode, we have a guest that will be sharing their badassery. But before we begin, here's today's Badassery Bestowment, my little badass gift to you. Today's topic is when to hire, fire, and automate your real estate investment business. Building a real estate investing empire isn't just about finding deals and flipping properties. It's about creating a well-oiled machine that runs efficiently. Knowing when to hire, fire, and automate can mean the difference between scaling to new heights or getting buried in a mountain of inefficiency. Here are 4 reasons why this is important for the longevity of your business. Number 1, hire when your time becomes too expensive. Your most valuable asset, time. If you're drowning in tasks that don't directly generate revenue, think admin work, bookkeeping, or property management, it's time to hire someone who can do it better and faster than you. Focus on your highest value tasks and delegate the rest. Number 2, fire when someone slows you down. Dead weight in your business? Cut it. If an employee, contractor, or even a business partner is costing you more time, money, and stress than they're worth, it's time to part ways. The wrong team members can kill momentum. The right ones push you forward. Number 3, automate when a system can do it for you. If you're repeating the same tasks daily, there's likely a way to automate it. CRM systems, virtual assistants, and AI-driven tools can handle lead management, follow-ups, and even deal analysis. Automate the routine so you can focus on the growth. Number 4, the ultimate goal, freedom and scalability. Your REI business should eventually run without you being in the trenches. The right mix of hiring, firing, and automating will create a system that works with or without you. That's the true mark of a real estate investing badass. So, hire to free up your time, fire what drags you down, and automate to scale. Master this and your real estate investment business will run like a machine while you cash the checks. Now on to today's episode of the Real Estate Investor Growth Network podcast. We have with us Derek Morton. Derek is a dedicated housing solutions advocate and owner and principal broker of Netgain Property Management Services. With a passion for serving underserved communities, he is known for his innovative approach to tackling housing challenges. From securing private investors to provide stable housing for individuals emerging from homelessness and domestic violence, to partnering with local organizations to expand mental health support for tenants, Derek is committed to creating real change. He and his wife Terre reside in Iron County, Utah, where they are raising their 3 children while continuing to make a meaningful impact in their community. It's my pleasure to have him on the show, so welcome, Derek Morton. Did I say your wife's name right?
You did.
Okay.
You did.
I normally ask those things before I hit record. I was like, oh, I forgot to ask. So it's Terre.
That's all right. A lot where she spells it different. She gets a lot of Terre.
Terre.
With the emphasis on the E.
That is so funny.
So you nailed it. Well done.
Perfect. Well, I am so happy to have you here. We truly have a housing crisis in the U.S. And I think your message, what you do for tenants, what you do for owners of multifamily properties or rental properties, I think is so very important. So thank you for being on the show today.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. So what started you in real estate?
So I had been in the title industry for years. I was a licensed title officer. I did all the grunt work behind the scenes. I was going to college at the time and realized I was going to make less with my degree. So I had to make a decision going, okay, do I want to play the long game or am I going to make a short-term decision? So I got my escrow license and moved down here to Cedar City with the company I was with, and then got let go because it was 2007, 2008. Got lucky, ended up with another title company. I was there for 7 years and loved them, but then also just kind of felt like I was plateauing. And so I'd had a buddy that we had talked about doing something together, and he wanted to start a real estate brokerage. And I'm like, I don't want to be a real estate agent. So we decided that we were going to partner and do property management. And so we did that, and I bought him out a year later. And that's just kind of the basic journey of just here we are now.
Who wants to be a real estate agent anyway?
I get in trouble when I speak honestly on that. So we're just going to let it go. This gets broadcast way more than my normal reach. And so I'm going to bite my tongue.
Well, I don't have the patience for it, number one. I was a middle school teacher for 16 years. And so all my patience has worn very, very thin. And so we actually own a brokerage ourselves, but I'm like, we're not real realtors. I don't have my real estate license. My husband does. But I'm like, we're not real realtors. It's just for people to hang their license. So anyway, enough about that. So what inspired you to start property management services, and how did someone screaming at you 2 months in change your perception of tenants? I can't wait to hear the story.
Funny story, in Utah, I didn't realize I had to be a licensed real estate agent and start a brokerage and all that. So the one thing I said I didn't want to do, I had to do anyways, but we did a different focus. When you start and everyone's like, well, why do you want to do that? You get yelled at every day, right? And I'm like, yeah, whatever, like it is what it is. And so I got this call, the tenant submitted a work order and stuff hadn't been done. My handyman had failed, and and you're glazing over, you're like, I'm getting yelled at. Yeah, this is what they told me. I'm going to get yelled at. And all of a sudden I'm like, wait, this guy's right. I sucked. And I'm like, I know I don't always have the most patience when things don't like go right. And so like, it's just kind of like, all right, like he's right. Then it just completely changed. I'm like, so, okay, how do I solve this? Here's what it is. Let's do this, and called and was able to get it fixed.
Right.
And whatever reason, right? And so I just kind of changed my focus going, oh, like if I want to get yelled at less, like I should probably be better at my job.
Huge. Yes.
It doesn't stop all the yelling. People are people. I tell people all the time, I love people as a whole. Sometimes individuals suck, but people as a whole are good, but individuals are different. And so that just kind of changed the perspective of going, hey, like, let me try to hone this in. And so like all my staff know, like our basic thing is we try not to suck. That's our sales pitch. And if we do, we try to fix it. And so like, if I'm not listening or paying attention to my staff, we are sucking right now. And it immediately catches my attention. And like, cause this fear like comes upon me. I'm like, okay, what do we got to do? And so that's just kind of been the ethos of the company from that moment.
So key point to not getting yelled at is not to suck.
It'll minimize.
That is true.
We've learned that. There's a minimization.
Well, good for you for having thick skin, because when people call about, I have a short-term rental right now and it's snowing in Western North Carolina and his car is stuck and I can't do anything about it right this second. But anyway, he's being a nice guy, but still having that thick skin is huge in this industry. So you focus on providing housing solutions for underserved communities. Can you share a success story that highlights the impact of your work?
So one of the coolest stories, and I won't give the tenant's name, was that she'd come out of domestic violence and she was broken. It's really one of the first times I've worked with someone that was just broken. To the point, like I have a tendency to talk with my hands. If you notice now in video, I'm like basically hugging myself. So I'm not like, and so she'd gotten to the apartment before and been unlocked. And so I walk in, introduce myself, and she's like immediately like apologizing. And I'm like, you did nothing wrong. It's your apartment. Like, here's what it is. And I realized that she was uncomfortable because I'm just talking to my hands. And so literally we're across the apartment and I'm having to like hands behind my back and everything so that she felt comfortable as we were talking. And she was dealing with some of the same struggles coming out of that and rebuilding your life. And in that, she had had a son that had been involved in an accident now that
Wow.
had a severe TBI. And it caused a lot of issues. And to where she really couldn't keep a job because she was trying to work with that. And even she did some work at home stuff and that didn't work because he would try to go back to school and the school for like, can't fault the school, but there's high risk there. And so like if he even was like having a headache, like she'd have to come grab him because they just didn't, want to take any risk. And so she was really struggling. And it got to the point where we had to have a hard decision. And at the time, I had some good relationships with some of the different organizations in town. And I basically said, you guys free for lunch on Wednesday? And it's like, sure. Like, what are we going? And I'm like, look, here's the deal. I know you've helped this lady. I know what your guidelines say, but she's done nothing wrong. Like, this is just life. And it's been a rough life. She had always kind of faulted herself thinking she made the wrong decision. But I'm like, you had 2 teenage kids that went to the women's shelter with you.
Wow.
Like, that tells you how bad it was. Like, you made the right decision. And so we figured out a solution and we were able to keep her through the end of her lease. And then she was able to, some opening and some income credit housing came available. And so she was able to get the stability that she needed to be able to make that next step. Whereas had we gone about any other way, it's like, oh, you're back on the street, or how are you going to make this work? And it just restarts the cycle. And so just trying to find those times for those interventions. And admittedly, we've been hosed on some of those as we've tried to show empathy. And we've had one recently so that I'm trying not to be bitter about. But by and large, like, we've learned that if we're able to interject and find the support for people when they need it, it like makes a huge difference.
And I love all of what you're saying. And as I mentioned, I was a former school teacher and our school was right next to a women's shelter. And a lot of times we'd have kids just temporarily while the moms were living there, and we would take care of the kids. And they were so angry, just mad at the world. And you just give them a little bit of love, and that really goes a very long way. So thank you, Derek, for treating her with kindness, with empathy. And so on that same topic, how do you balance that as a business owner, being an advocate? Because you also mentioned in the same breath that you got burned recently, but how do you be an advocate for tenants facing these housing challenges?
I don't know. I'm still trying to figure that out. Like I said, like we do good, like, and we feel good about it. And then we'll have 2 in a row that just hose us. And I'm like, why do I do this?
Yes.
And they're never like small hosing, like to where you're like, okay, like I feel bad. It's always like major. And I'm like,
destruction.
Like,
and yes.
Yeah, I'm like, this is a tough conversation with the owner. We've kept the owners informed through, so they're kind of on the same page, and we'll go choose the right owners. But then it's like, my bad, I advocated for them. Your insurance premium's going up.
Oh, man.
But by and large, like the nice thing is if you choose the right owners and you're able to work with them, like they get a share in that success. Like everyone likes to make money, right?
Yeah.
And there's something special, and the owners are attracted to. A lot of them like going back, like people as a whole are good. And so like they get to take part in that success. Like, cool, I'm making money and I'm like genuinely helping someone. And we do different things when we make these steps to help protect the owners to the best of our abilities. So they're to minimize that risk, but then they're part of the success. And we get to tell them kind of the stories. And like, I know the first transitional house we set up, I still manage this owner's properties, and that he's grown his portfolio. And when we first walked through the house that we set up that was for men coming out of homelessness, I mean, it's not the nice house, but it gets the job done. And it was the first time I kind of told him the good and the bad that we had to deal with. And he's just like, oh, I thought this was a swimming success. I didn't realize you had to deal with this. And I'm like, no, like we did it. But he's like, I didn't lose any money. Like, you've kept it full. And I'm like, yeah, we've done good. And I'm like, but look, here's the success stories we've had. And I introduced him some of the tenants, and he just thought it was the coolest thing.
I think that's fantastic. I'm sorry I cut you off.
Oh, no.
I love that it's not just about making money, it's about making a difference. And what a gift that you can provide for these people and educate the owners at the same time. But I cut you off. What were you going to say? I'm sorry.
I was going to say one of the coolest stories about that. And like, it was sad, but the owner, like, this is what like sold him. Cause the original pitch, we were just making it up as we go. Like he had a different idea for the property. I pitched it like, if we did this, and I didn't want to do it that way. And so I'm like, well, if we did this, and what does that look like? I'm like, I don't know. So we kind of made it up. But about 6 months in, I got a call, because all the calls come on a Sunday night, right? Like,
Of
and
course.
this tenant had died, and he'd had a hard life, and we'd had a couple conversations and stuff with him, and I really liked him and respected him. And I remember him saying that his kids didn't even talk to him, and there's reasons being, because I mean, he was an idiot, an alcoholic, and he just had made rough decisions, and he'd been an abuser, and all of this. And he's like, I can't fault him, and it was me, and trying to come to terms with the decisions that he made. And so he passed away, and he basically said, no one's going to be at my funeral, and all of this. But like, I remember him just saying, he's like, I'm just glad that I have some stability here. Like, I can figure my stuff out, and this has been a great blessing to me. And so, in one hand, I had to like call the owner, and it was a difficult conversation because, hey, a tenant died, and he'd rolled off his bed, and he'd been there long enough. We have to change the carpet. We'll just put it that way without going into too much gory detail. So, hey, like, sorry. And now it's a biohazard, so there's a little bit more to it. But able to explain that story to
Owner.
the owner, and he was like, "Oh, I provided like for his last 5 months, like kind of his stability on his body just given out because of the hard life, but he hadn't been drinking or anything like that since." And then we did like there was like 5 people from the homeless shelter here, and then I went to the viewing, and I'm used to viewings being one way, and this viewing was basically they had him on a gurney and say goodbye, and then basically we were able to slide him into the incinerator for him, because that's all the kind of family could afford. And but I remember like the owners being like, okay, like we are able to do good. And I'm glad that I was able to provide that. And like, it just kind of helped sell them on the cause.
Well, I think that's a tragic story. So great that you were able to provide it for that person. So speaking of having to replace carpet and do these type of things, so what are some key strategies landlords can use to maximize their rental returns while maintaining quality housing?
Big thing is minimizing turnover.
Good.
Like, you've got a good tenant, then make it worth their while to be able to stay. And that's where some of it, like, we've learned some of the resources that are available so that they can stay if need be, and protect the owner's investment. The other thing that we did, which was counterintuitive, and it's probably one of the best things we've done for our business, is during COVID, we realized rents were raising way more than the income.
Right.
And so we went against the grain and dropped our rent to income ratio from 3 times to 2 times the rent.
Oh, wow.
And now, to still protect the owners, we increased our deposit from 1x the rent. So if the rent was 1,000, the deposit was 1,000. We actually increased it to 1,500. So 1.5 times, which in some ways would make it a disincentive, because like, oh, your deposit's larger. But we did research and we found some security deposit alternatives. So we use one that's obligo. That's one of my favorites. And it works like a hotel deposit. So with a $1,500 deposit, they pay $150 a year. And then when we do the move out, it pulls however much from their account. So if we only use $700 for repairs and cleaning, we only pull $700 from that account. But now they're not having to come up with the $1,500 up front. So it makes it easier and actually lessens the burden for people to get into the housing. And then with that, the other one that we use is Lease Guard, and it's one of my favorite it's the other one that I absolutely love. It's an insurance product. So for the $1,500, they pay, I think it's like $45 a month. It's all non-refundable because it's like your car insurance or whatever. So you pay that premium. They have $1,500 of protection, and they've paid maybe $600. Then we just make claims against that insurance policy, and then they pay us out that money. So
Very cool.
having those two options for additional flexibility have made it huge to be able to get
Absolutely.
tenants in there. And if you have a tenant that you're going to have to do a double deposit, it's still much more affordable for them. And the owner has that additional protection. And the ones on the 2X or 2 times rent to income, I think I can think back over the last 3 years, maybe one or two that we've had issues with,
Wow.
as opposed to the 3X. And we've found that most investors, I want a family or I want a young family, right? Well, with 3X, young families struggle to be able to make that work. So you'd have a lot of like, oh, we've got a young couple with a kid, and then their friends would move in so they can make it work. And so with this, we've been able to find more, you know, families and everything that are able to move in and still be able to help the young couples and the young marrieds that are just trying to get off their feet to be able to make it work and be able to get into housing and be able to afford it and keep it stable.
So, what I'm hearing from you is a phrase that I love. It's learn to bend. It's better than breaking. And for you, especially in real estate, we have that flexibility to make those changes, especially when we're in a down season and we have to sometimes shift our business and our focus. So I think that is fantastic. And I'm glad to hear the report that only one or two actually had issues after having to lower that minimum to get in there. So we've been talking a lot about tenants. I want to know a little bit more about choosing the right owner, because you have mentioned this in your questionnaire in the beginning. By the way, how many properties do you manage?
We're at 650 units that we manage.
Woo, my goodness. So how do you choose the right owner? Because I am an owner of a small multifamily, and I'm just curious, what can I do to better my relationship with my property manager at this point?
Well, and it's, for me, it's like just like dating. And this is what I've learned, right? So I've had owners and agreed to manage their stuff that I knew we weren't going to get along. And I remember a couple of times like sitting there and I'm like, this isn't going to work. I see all the red flags. Like, you're hitting my triggers. I can tell I'm hitting your triggers. But why am I going to hire you? And sure enough, I'm like, okay, I'll hire them. It's this much more money and all this stuff. And then I'm like, you're the biggest pain and it's not worth it. And it's no fun.
Right.
And it's not fun for them and it's not fair to them. They have every right to do what they want with their property. If an owner wants to be a slumlord, they have every right. But that's not the way I want to run my business. So why would I hire you or agree to take your property if I can tell like you're not wanting to do repairs and you're going to nickel and dime everything? And instead of like, you hired me to trust to do the property. Let's have honest conversations. If you have any questions, concerns, if you want to be heavily involved in the decision making of it, like, manage it yourself. Like,
Yep.
you hired me to do it. If you don't want to do that, or if you don't trust me, don't hire me. Like, I'm okay. And it helps. Like, I mean, I would have trusted myself more when I was younger and starting out, because at that point I'm like, I'll take everyone. And now I'm like, over the last 3 years, I'm like, I'm big enough. I don't need your crap anymore. Like, no, let's move on. Like, it's not worth it. And owner, like, I laugh because owner's like, I think it's time for us to move on. I'm like, how freaking will you? I'm like, oh, you're not going to fight for him? No, we're good.
Peace out.
Like, when my employees are like giving a standing ovation as they walk out the door, like, that tells you everything they need to know. And they're not bad owners and necessarily, like, there's just certain ways that they want to run their property. And so it's learning them like what's important to me and finding people that match. And as we've done that, like, it makes our day-to-day more enjoyable. Like, when we have a maintenance request or something that comes through and we have to go through the owner, they're not fearful, like, oh, I'm going to get yelled at and they're going to say it's the tenant's fault and all this stuff. And you're like, the faucet broke. Like, it was a 30-year-old faucet. It was a 50-year-old water heater. Like,
Right.
these things like happen, right? And someone's like, oh, it's got to be the tenant's fault. Or it's like, oh, I don't have the money for that. And like, 50 years old, like, it was going to go at some point. A 20-year furnace, all that stuff. Like, it's painful as a property owner to do that, but to be able to have the conversation, like, okay, no, that makes sense, and we're able to move on, and they trust our vendors and to get them a good price, and it just makes it easier.
So I have a question on this, because My biggest complaint is the communication. And how do I bridge that gap where I don't feel like I'm getting much communication at all? I will reach out and say, hey, did this tenant finally move out? So we have a troubled tenant who has garbage everywhere. Nice gentleman, just his the inside of his unit has progressed to the outside.
He's the Oscar the Grouch.
Exactly. There's a car out there that's, I don't think it ever moved, but you have to constantly reach out to her and say, what's going on with this tenant? I randomly went up and checked on the property. It's 2 hours away. And on one side where there's a couple vacant units, the grass was up to my waist. And I'm like, what is going on? So how does one, and I don't mean to bash her because I'm sure she's a busy person. She is a very nice lady, but how do I bridge that connection right there and have those conversations and not be the jerk that your people will applaud as I'm walking out the door? So how do I open those lines better?
Well, let me clarify. We all know, so if we have sucked, we can't control what happens, right?
Okay.
So going back to that. So if we're failing and you point out that we're failing, there's nothing wrong with having that conversation.
Okay.
That's a conversation you should have. And if they're not willing to have that conversation, then that's not the right management. But that communication, that's been the hardest thing as I've grown. And I'm working and trying to figure that out to be able to get that communication. Some of it we've used some technology. So we know we use rent check for our inspections. So we're able to upload that with our annual inspections. And so the owners have access to that in their tenant portal. We use Appfolio. Love the software. Props to them. Same with rent check. And so it gets uploaded so you can have that. And then if there's any questions, any maintenance requests, we use Property Meld. The owner gets an email. And so if they have any questions on that, they can see what's going on. And we can head through that. I use Show Mojo to schedule our showings. So each week, if we have a property on the market, the tenants or the owners are getting an email saying, hey, here's how many leads we had. Here's showings. If those showings gave feedback, they get that feedback.
Huge.
And that's been nice because for me, that's, like I said, it's the hardest part. It's on the market. And then the owners are calling hey, what's going on? I'm well, we're not getting any leads. Or we had 2 showings and here's what it is. And so they're reaching out. But now if they have that, they're hey, we got this feedback. Is that a common feedback? What's this? Is the rent really too high? And sometimes it's yeah. Sometimes it's it's just a soft market. We can lower it if you want. I'll leave this up to you, but that's a completely different conversation. Now, if an owner and it happens, hey, I drove by and I'm I haven't driven past that in 3 months. And can you have them look at the yard? Or this is a little bit trash. Yep, here's what it is. Did you get pictures? And then we can take care of it with the tenant because we are a team. And we all do the best we can, but that communication is it's the hardest thing to grasp and get a handle on. And it's always been kind of the weak spot. And we're trying to figure out, I'm working on hiring a virtual assistant that'll start in March. That'll take some of that off of me because most of the failures on me. My girls are awesome, but there's certain aspects that I'm as the owner, I'm I'll do that. And then I'm oh, I'm failing. So how do we bridge that? And a lot of that's the communication. And so we get the calls from the owners and I'm you're right. We failed. Here, let's look at that. Or sometimes I'm oh yeah, here's the conversation we've had with them. They've got this. I've meant to talk to you about that. And then we'll pass that on. But that's yeah, you as the owner, if you have those concerns, hopefully they respond when you send the email or phone call or text, whatever it is. Because like I said, if not, then you should probably find another management company.
I know it's tough because it's a very rural area. So we have tried and we are kind of stuck in that situation. We're actually trying to sell the property now just to get out of it completely. I know. But going back to you being showing empathy for tenants and being an advocate for mental health situations, things like that. So what are some, for people out there listening who aren't in Utah that own a property and they want to find simple ways that landlords can provide better support to tenants facing challenges like financial hardship or mental health struggles? So what are some ways that they can provide better support?
So one, first off, just listening, hearing the story, a lot of us that have been around, sometimes you're like, yeah, that's a lie. And you're like, yeah, we can deal with that. And other times it's like, holy crap, your life sucks. Like, okay, how do we work through this? Like we tell all our tenants, like, there's very few things that we can't work with as long as you're communicating with us. Like, for as much as like we talk about the empathy and the way the girls and stuff we are, like, at the same time, I tell everyone I'm an empathetic jackass. Like, I have to protect the owner's property. And whatever side you get is like really comes down to you, because I can be very blunt and get my point across. It was a talent I didn't realize that I had until I started in property management. But just one, being able to listen and go, okay, like, what are the next steps? What am I able to do? Because there's sometimes that you're like, here's what I can do, here's what I can't do. And you have certain requirements and things that you have financially. And so sometimes you just can't do it. And so, okay, what's the exit strategy? Like, how do we get this out to minimize damage to you and me? But most of the homeless shelters have resources. There's different government.
That's my next question is, how do they find these resources to help out these tenants? Yeah.
Googling them is one. I know, like, some of it is as an industry, we've got to do a better job. We do really, really good at being and making money. We're like experts at it. And there's nothing wrong with it. We're in business and everything. But there's some ways that you can actually, like, so my dream product, I'll just throw this out there, that I've been trying to put together and just haven't quite figured out exactly. But I mean, are you familiar with resident benefit packages?
I'm not.
Okay. So resident benefit packages are basically, I won't call it a scam, but it's a great way to make money.
Wow.
So, well, let's put it this way: false advertising.
Okay.
So resident benefit package, you're like, oh yeah, this will benefit the resident, but really it's like, we put together this package that we can make more money. But most resident benefit packages, like, hey, we've got to move in concierge. There's credit reporting, which is like fantastic. Like, rent should be reported to the credit bureau. Like, it just should. So there's that. But then it's like, oh, we send you quarterly filters so you can change your filter and protect your HVAC. And then there's like renters insurance and stuff that's usually part of it for 35 to 40 bucks a month. But really, on the whole, very beneficial. But a lot of property managers growing, and it's like, oh, we're going to require this. Now, if you took kind of a similar product under the same thing, you can still make money and say, hey, what would it take? And where you talked a little bit about your background, appreciate this with your Aflac sales. But if you had, say, something for the same price, be able to throw in, hey, an accident policy, you can still do the credit reporting, and then you throw in access to mental health for the same price, and throw in some renters insurance, we're able to make money, and we can actually benefit the tenants and be able to get people the help. We had a partnership with betterhelp.com there for a while. So all our tenants had access to 1 free month of mental health. The hurdle is they would have to, like, kind of communicate that with us, and then we could get them connected. And what tenant's going to want to be like, hey, I'm struggling. Like, a lot of them don't even want to tell us they can't pay rent. Like, let's be honest.
Exactly.
Hey, like, I don't feel quite right. I might need to talk to someone. And so that was a huge hurdle. But if you're able to give them access another way, then they can get that access, and we can still make a little bit of money, because, like I said, there's nothing wrong with that. But then it really is a benefit to the tenants and to us to be able to provide an impact for them, to keep them housed and minimize the turnover. Those type of cause a lot.
Well, I want to thank you personally for really taking this on and making a difference, because we do truly have a housing crisis as far as affordability. But then on the flip side, it's the people who are staying there, and you're providing these services and making it available for them without them having to speak up. And because a lot of times they don't want to speak up when they do need the help. And so I'm just really honored to have you on the show here to share your message. So if there's listeners out there and maybe they have questions for you, or maybe want to kind of set up the same type of platforms for their business, what's a good way for them to reach out and maybe contact you?
So they can call the office, 435-263-0933, or you can reach out through our website, Netgain PM for propertymanagement.com.
Very, very cool. Well, I appreciate the message that you have, and it's really made me kind of look back at my multifamily property, and I want to have the conversation, that tough conversation, probably with our management company, but also about our actual tenants, and be a better landlord myself and see what I can do to help them through things as well. So thank you for portraying that to me and for the listeners out there. We are going to move to the second part of the podcast here, which is what makes Derek a badass. And I use the acronym BADASS, and the first letter is B for book. What's a book that's made a huge difference in your life?
So I threw it in two. So first one was Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. I read it my junior year in high school.
What is it? Zen and the
Art of Motorcycle,
okay.
Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance.
Okay.
It was written by Robert Pirsig, and I think in the 70s. And it's a book that junior in high school, my English teacher, I hated reading. I'm still not a huge fan, but I do it. It's amazing. You learn when you read, but I like to learn. But it was a kind of a fictional drive on a motorcycle and the issues with the motorcycle. And it kind of tore apart. It was a philosophical book that tore apart everything I believed and then built it back up on the basis, what is quality? That was the question of it throughout the whole book as the guys go through a mental health break. And it's a crazy book to describe, but it was awesome. And there's just been times that I've ran into people. We sitting on a bus and all of a sudden someone next to me is reading. I'm like, oh, have you been to this chapter? And so it's just always been a conversation starter. And it's kind of a weird book that's just popped up throughout my life at different times and has made a positive impact. Just ask the question, what is quality? And you're like, it's a good question.
Very cool. And I know nothing about motorcycles, but I do love me some Zen, and I feel like it's very important to have in your life. So cool book. Thank you for sharing that. All right. The first A in badass is for advice. What's the best piece of advice you've ever received?
So my grandpa, before he died, we're a family of Mortons that are kind of we just do our own thing. No one's really broke out and been this huge success. And he's like, the best part of being a Morton is no one has high expectations. So it makes it easier to provide for your family, clearing people's low hurdles. And I'm like, it took so much pressure off of my life. I'm like, perfect.
Way to go, grandfather. I love that. And I'm sorry. By the way, you're saying Morton, not Mormon, because I know that Mormon is very big in Utah where you are.
Yeah, yes, there's that. And I hear moron a lot too, because I don't see the T's. So.
Oh my goodness, you cracked me up. All right, the D in badass is for drive. What drives you to be successful?
Being able to provide for my family.
I love that. And you're providing for so many other people's families as well. So, all right, that was quick and easy. The second A in badass is for aspiration. I'm a big goal setter. So what is a goal you are currently working on?
Having a fully self-managing business, and we're getting closer.
Wouldn't that be so nice to sit back and just let everybody else do the work for you? I'm with you on that. I want that. All right. The first S in badass is for systems. What systems do you have in place to help you achieve success?
I invest in a lot of technology.
Huge.
Just lots of technology.
Speaking of that, the portal system that they use for our property, I do not understand it at all. So what type of portal system do you use where your owners can go in and check who's paid rent, who's done all that fun stuff?
Do you know what software they use?
I don't, because I hate it. I can't figure it out.
Well, let me know. Figure it out and then email me, because now I may be like, oh, I use Appfolio. And you're going to be like, I use Appfolio too. They use Appfolio too. But I'm like, I love it. So Appfolio, like I said, it has the owner portal, lets you know the percentage of people that have paid rent. We upload all the reports and everything there for the owners. They get an email, let them know when they've been paid, how much rent is it's all in
that
one.
That would be something good to know. What is outstanding? Because we inherited this property from another investor, and the rents were all over the place. Some really, really low, and was never increased over 12 years. This person lived with the original rent payment. So anyway, I complain again, but Appfolio, I took note if you saw me write that down. All right. Well, I'm so very, very impressed with you and everything that you do. And so the final S in badass is for success. What does success mean to Derek?
All right, freedom to do or buy what I want without worrying if I have the time or money to do it.
Very well said. Buy what you want. I like that, because sometimes you need to buy an RV or
I want to buy my WrestleMania tickets since it's in Vegas. Like that's the goal. And I'm like, I'm not quite at that point where I'm willing to buy it off where I want to sit. So.
Well, Derek, this has been so great speaking to you, and I appreciate all the advocacy that you do for tenants, and it's very rare in this industry. I have a actual close friend who is very hard-headed towards tenants, and so I hope he knows who he is. I hope he listens to this episode. And
I call him out by name by calling him out.
He totally knows
that was very not subtle.
He knows what I'm talking about. He's great at what he does, but he can weave in a little bit more empathy. And I do appreciate all your insight on that and everything that you do for your tenants. So, Derek, thank you so much for being here today.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And that is all. Thank you for listening. We will catch you on the next episode. Now go out there and share your badassery. And don't forget, make it a great day. Take care. Bye-bye. Whoop, whoop.
Thank you for listening to RAIN, the Real Estate Investor Growth Network. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform so you never miss an episode. If you need more badassery, you can follow Jen Josey by visiting therealjenjosey.com or become a member of RAIN by registering on rainmastermind.com.